Duck. Let's get into it. Plotline to this one. After Grimm has a nice dream to where he imagines himself with this wife character, which is this random creature, Grimm tells Billy about these little nightmare things that come out of his head when he has a nice dream. And after they search the room, there's this duck that appears, and it's pretty much a farting duck. Yep, this is what we have here, folks. A duck that goes around sticking his tongue out to make the blown raspberry sound and makes it look like other characters are farting. That's just great. And so what we got, he follows Grimm around at first and then starts following other characters and pretty much framing them for farting, to where they get into ridiculous kinds of trouble. I will say that. Now, how this one turned out for me. I have said before in other episodes, yes, I am not a fart joke guy. I am not a fan of those types of jokes. Even if it doesn't look like the characters are actually doing it, and it's the duck making the sound by sticking his tongue out, he's still making it look like the characters are doing it, so it's close to being like fart jokes. Now, here's the thing. This episode actually is not terrible. I don't hate this one, even with all of that in the episode, because there were some other actual funny moments I found. That's why it avoids being a terrible episode, but this is definitely not one of my most favorites. It's still better than some of the other episodes in the series. I wouldn't say it's too close to being one of the worst, but at best, it's a mixed bag to me. There are some actual funny bits in it, so that's why I can't call this one terrible, but yeah, the whole farting thing with the duck, it did start to get annoying, as I had expected. But time to get into the story of this one, and oh boy, be prepared for all of this. So it starts with this show-like opening where it says The Reapers, as if it's some sitcom where Grimm enters, does the honey I'm home line, and he's with this wife character, but it doesn't look too feminine, and it's this random creature, and it goes on for a little bit to where eventually he gets out of the dream, and he hears Billy repeatedly saying same as it ever was at a fast speed. What, you're trying to reference Once in a Lifetime by the Talking Heads, where in the song he says same as it ever was, except not as fast as Billy, the way David Byrne says it in the song. But yeah, we get that little random bit, and that's where Grimm tells Billy about, oh, whenever I have a nice dream, these creatures get out of the head, through the back, and they rampage. And so they get to search in Billy's room, and there's a random bra that gets found, to where Billy's like, wait, I can explain on that. But then that's where the duck appears. And yeah, it's really odd that the episode's just titled Duck. Like, that's it. That's just simply the title, Duck. Not even going to call it the farting duck in the title, but that pretty much is what it is. He's making it look like characters are farting. Because, yeah, Grimm goes up to it and he's trying to say things. The duck makes the sound. Billy thinks that Grimm farted. That's our joke throughout the episode, making it look like characters are farting. Now, if there's those who find the episode funny, that's good for you. I'm not going to hate on you for it. And I'm not even going to hate on people who somewhat laugh at fart jokes. I'm not going to make fun of you or say you're bad for liking those jokes or laughing at them. But I want to know why you find them funny. That's the thing. And Billy at first thought he saw this green elephant. Yes, he says it as elephant instead of elephant. And then Grimm has to remind him, oh, I know you're stupid, Billy, but you're not blind. And that's where we get to all that. Billy leaving the room and says, oh, I'll come back in when you and your butt can behave properly. So then we have this duck following Grimm around outside at a bus stop, and then getting on the bus. People are trying to get away from him because they think he's stinking it up. And he gets to this house, to this old guy, and he prepares to do the reaping of his soul of sorts. And the old guy's saying, oh, can I have a hug and all? And Grimm's going to give him this hard candy, but he drops it. And of course, as he bends down to pick it up, the duck makes the sound to make it look like he farted. Now, the old guy doesn't do much there. He just says, oh, I love you, son. And Grimm just leaves. To where then he's on a swing set. These kids come up to him and they offer him this soda. To where he at first is like, oh, wait a minute, that's a nice thing. And then tries to get out of it. To where they have to say, oh, it's not a generic brand. It's a real one. But then the duck has to make the sound right there too. And Grimm has to keep going like, oh, I didn't do it or anything. And he takes off his robes and is like, oh, I'm a skeleton. How can I make those sounds? And the kids run away in fear. And this police officer shows up. So Grimm pretty much got arrested for the public nudity. For all of that. So great. Now the duck's getting him thrown in jail. And in the jail cell, there's this prisoner in there that says, oh, I beat up a guy that farted. That's why he's in there. So now Grimm's getting scared because he thinks that Duck's going to make the sounds right there. And the guy, the prisoner, he would beat Grimm up. And so Grimm thinks that the one who's bailing him out has arrived, and that's Irwin. But then when this piggy bank gets broken, it's only $4.28 in it. To where the officer has to say, you need $3,500 to bail him out. And Irwin just runs off freaking out saying, oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't get you out. And then that's where we see Irwin in a car with his dad and his grandmother. And of course, the duck has now followed Irwin. Where he's trying to convince his dad that the duck is in there. He's saying, oh, this duck is creeping me out. And his dad's like, what duck? The grandma eventually then has to say, I don't want to hear any more sass out of you back there. Then that's where the duck starts making the noises. And it keeps doing it repeatedly. To where both his dad and his grandmother think that he's stinking up the car now. To where Irwin even tries to admit that he did it then. That, oh, he popped the woofie, or whatever he says, and blew the tushy trumpet. That's how he says it. I'm not even kidding. He says those words pretty much. And they were actually heading to a baseball game, and they get there, and there's this guy, this baseball player who appears saying, oh, this is going to be the last game with this goatee before it's traded to Atlanta, as he says. And then when he says, oh, a moment of silence for it, guess what happens? The duck makes the sound. And they all of a sudden start to target Irwin thinking that he did it. And once again, he has to say, it wasn't me. And Irwin and his family are chased out of the baseball stadium. And then on this news report, they're thrown in jail too. So great. Grimm's been thrown in there. This other prisoner is already in there, the inmate. And now Irwin, his dad, and his grandmother have been thrown in jail. All because of this duck. So that adds more to why there's plenty of flaws, unfortunately for me, for this episode. I mean, again, if you like it, fine. But some of these kind of framing things I'm not a fan of either when it comes to framing plots of episodes like this, where someone gets framed. But really, that's just how out of control this duck is. And then as they're in the cell, Grimm has to say, at the rate this duck is going, within about 4 hours at least, the entire cell will be filled with people. So then we see Harold, and he sees the duck, and it automatically cuts to him being thrown in there, when the duck didn't even actually make the sound there. Oh yeah, and then that's where Grimm says that thing about the cell being filled up. And then it says at least 2 hours later, and we got lots of people in there. And plenty of characters from Evil Con Carne appear. Where we have Boskov in there, Hector, General Scar, and Commando Cod. No Major Dr. Ghastly though, so she got lucky. She didn't have to get thrown in there with them. So Ghastly, you got lucky there that you didn't get thrown in with them. And what Hector says here did actually make me laugh. I will admit, this was funny. Where he's like, I'm not even in this stupid show anymore. Yeah, referring back to when it was Grim and Evil, when it was both shows together. When Billy, Mandy, and Evil Con Carne were together before they became separate shows. So that makes sense. And I'll admit, that line was funny. So see, there are still some funny bits within this episode. So I don't entirely hate this episode. Despite how mad I got at some of the parts. I don't entirely hate this one. Because it still has funny bits like that line there. And then finally, about 10 minutes in, is where Mandy appears. So in a way, this episode would arguably be the shortest amount of screen time that she's had in an episode. Maybe also, He's Not Dead, He's My Mascot, where she actually left the episode and climbed out of there. So yeah, it takes until the final 3 or 4 minutes for Mandy to appear. Yeah, because I was wondering throughout a majority of it, where is she? For like the first 10 minutes, she doesn't appear. Only with about 3 or 4 minutes left, because this episode actually goes up to 14 minutes. out of a 23-minute runtime from what I got for the player. So that would mean the next episode's about 9 minutes. But, yeah, when there's about 3 or 4 minutes left, that's when Mandy appears. So finally she appears. And I've been wondering, what is going to happen with her and the duck? Sure enough, she's going to her locker. The duck appears. It makes the sound. These two girls are there and they say, oh, someone was raised in a fart barn. But then Mandy says nothing and just slams the locker door shut. And then we have her in the library, and oh boy, what happens here? And she's not acting too fazed by this duck, where it keeps making the sound to where the librarian all of a sudden comes up and is like, oh, why are you behaving like this, or whatever she says. And some of the back and forth between Mandy and the librarian was a bit funny too, I'll admit, where it starts with the librarian going like, is that any way to behave? And Mandy's like, no, I suppose not, but walking up and yelling at someone doing their work seems rude. And then the librarian's like, oh, I will not tolerate this kind of behavior. And Mandy's having to say, oh, it's your problem and not mine. The next bit really made me laugh, to where the librarian says, I will not stand for this. And Mandy says, there's an empty chair right there. This is why I like Mandy sometimes. The stuff she says on how she fires back at somebody. Like, this is why I like Mandy sometimes. The stuff she says, it's like, empty chair. Gotta get up and show for a bit. It's like, there's an empty chair right there, so pretty much going like, have a seat. And the librarian looks like she's about to completely freak out. And Mandy's saying, oh, can you have your meltdown somewhere else? I'm busy writing a report on the history of corn. Yeah, on the history of corn, how it was made. No, not the band, but how the food corn was made and such, how it came to be. And so then we have Mandy in the principal's office, to where the principal, his name is Principal Good Vibes, and he's trying to talk to Mandy, but the duck keeps interrupting him with that sound. And he's having to ask her, oh, are you alright and such? You're doing fine at home, eating well, not too many beans and broccoli. And she's saying like, oh, I'm doing good and such. And Mandy's saying that she's eating well, and he's saying, oh, I had the name legally changed to Good Vibes, and you have to let me know if there's anything wrong, that he wants to be the friend. She's saying, no, nothing at all. And then we have this person coming in and saying Spurg's at it again, and we have Spurg hanging Billy up on the flagpole. Yeah, Billy was near the beginning of the episode, but throughout the middle parts he didn't appear. Billy didn't. So then the principal has to go get Billy down, and he's saying, oh, don't touch that PA system. And the duck goes up to it, and Mandy actually says, knock yourself out. So she's actually okay with it doing it. So it presses the button, and there it goes, letting the sound loose all over the PA system. Where it's heard throughout the school, the hallways, the lunchroom, where there's this lunch lady who says, I thought I was the only one who was allowed to cut the cheese. And she's actually holding a thing of cheese and a knife as she says it. Her saying that was funny too. So see, again, there are still some funny bits in this episode I laughed at. So that's why I don't entirely hate this one. Again, at best, it's still a mixed bag, but those funny bits are enough to keep it from it being horrible and terrible. But yeah, it keeps doing that, and it's heard in the classroom as well. And how all that ends is with the kids just throwing up their lunch trays and celebrating. It's like, yay! I'm like, what is this episode turning into? And the next bit with Mandy, where she's talking to the duck now, and says, oh, you may think that you're annoying, but considering what I have to put up with, thinking that, with the duck thinking that, oh, he's making her crazy or hallucinating and all of that. And of course, it shows images of her putting up with Billy and stuff. And they throw an image from Creating Chaos in there. Remember that episode, how much I was not a fan of that one. Which, even this duck episode is better than that. I'll say that at least. But, you want to know what image they throw in there? That bit where Billy was riding Eris, they actually put that in this episode as part of the sequences of what Mandy was thinking of. I'm not kidding. It's actually in the episode. They actually put that image of Billy riding Eris in this one too. I thought I would never have to see that image again in this series. After seeing it originally in that episode. Yes, that image appears again in this episode of Billy riding Eris. I'm not kidding. That actually appears again. Oh, what she was saying to it was, you think you've won? You think you've broken me? Well, it's humiliated me, broken me, and driven me crazy. That's what she says to it. And then says, oh, that she's had to put up with Billy. And again, shows that image of Billy riding Eris. Although, to be honest, if I was in that position of where she is and having to deal with this duck, I would have at least been the third of those, driven crazy by it. And the principal eventually comes back in, and he starts to fume and get mad, thinking that Mandy broke the rules. Because now we're at Mandy's house, and Billy and Grim are there, and Mandy appears, and they're actually asking about detention. And she says 74 more days to go. So she got 75 days of detention for that. Negative continuity, but still. And there is a fart sound that plays again there, but the duck is now gone. And the grandma comes up and looks at the viewer as if they did it. I certainly didn't do it while I was watching the episode. I thought they were going to look at Billy and think he did it, or something. Or Billy and Mandy would have looked at Grim. But yeah, that's how this whole episode ends, with that. So on to final thoughts with this one. So the letter grade for this one. Yes, because of all the fart bits in there, I can't say it's a great episode, so it's definitely not an A. It's not terrible either, so it's not an F. So what I'm going to go with a C, and it's right around the middle. Those funny bits are enough to put it up to here. So it's pretty much right smack dab in the middle of the entire scale of C. Right in the middle of it. So it's not too close to a B or a D. So yeah, the farting bits, well, the duck making the sound, it did start to get annoying throughout the episode. That's why it falls to here. Doesn't fall any lower because there were some other actual genuine funny moments in it. So at best, this episode is a mixed bag. It's definitely not one of my most favorites, although some of the actual funny moments, I would say probably would be some of my favorite funny moments. So at least this episode has that. And I'm at least a bit relieved it wasn't terrible, because even with some of the bits I got mad at in this, I would have been much madder than that if the episode was terrible. I would have been more angrier if it was actually terrible. Thankfully it's not. But it's still a mixed bag. It's still not an amazing episode. I mean, if you like it, cool, but I'm just glad I don't hate this one, but there's definitely lots of other episodes I would take over this one. Now, again, at least with an episode like Creating Chaos or this, I would actually choose this episode. And even Sickly Sweet. And yes, Sickly Sweet is still my least favorite episode of the show right now. I haven't had an episode worse than that one so far. So yes, even this episode I would take over Sickly Sweet. So, yeah, Duck. Well, apparently this episode's not bad enough to be considered one that's breaking wind or anything. And I guess to play on the other form of Duck, it won't have to duck from any attack, since I don't think it's terrible. So, that's it with that one. On to the other episode.